and ask yourself, did this forum help answer questions and help you with your decision making? Now, before we begin any further, I'd like to go over the format of our session. We're scheduled to be finished by 8 p.m. And to help keep us on track, we have a timekeeper, Deborah Arendt, in the front row, who has signals for the candidates who tell them when they have 30 seconds left, and a red sign to show them, and you might hold it up when the time is up. And also, in order to have an impartial and fair forum, we believe that there are some guidelines to conduct these forums. We've shared those with the candidates. They've agreed to those. We also ask the audience to work with us so that when you send us questions, and already a whole bunch have already come in, we do have some 4 or 5 students from Presentation High School who are helping us tonight, and they are passing out cards, index cards, and collecting them. So raise your hands if you would like them. But I want to ask that you address these questions to both candidates. I will also ask that there's no audience demonstration, clapping, and so forth during the forum, just so we can keep things going. And now might be a very good time for you to turn off any electronic devices and put them on vibrate or silent, or whatever it is your device does, just so that it doesn't beep and interfere with our program. We do have some cameras here. We had Create TV that will be airing this, and I understand we have a camera from one of the candidates' office. It's important that if anything that is shown, be shown in its entirety so that it is not edited and misused, and we appreciate that. We have a table full of people to my left, your right, who are looking at the questions. They're going to combine them, so if there's similar questions, we'll put them all together. We may not get to all of them. We think maybe we'll get through maybe about 15 questions. I also want to note that there are 4 more in-depth questions that the neighborhood group has put together, and I'll be asking those as well. We'll start with a 1-minute opening statement from each candidate. By picking numbers, we will start with Mr. Cortese and then Mr. Liccardo, just a few minutes. And depending on the nature of the question, as we take questions later, the candidates will have different amounts of time to answer the various questions. So I will be letting them know how much time they have, and as timekeeper, you may want to keep track of that, okay? Then we will have a 30-second close. And again, in the interest of time, please hold your applause and not do any demonstrations during the process. So now let's opening with our opening statement, and we'll start with Mr. Cortese.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the organizations that have been doing the outreach and putting this on, promoting this particular forum. I'm here running for mayor because I care very deeply about this city, and I've cared for just about as long as I can remember. I've been civically involved since the 4th grade, writing my first letter to my congressman, but then a couple years later involved because of my father's political career with campaigns. I grew up as part of an orchard farming family in the East Side in Evergreen, but I went on to run businesses full-time for over 15 years, and I'm still a business person to this day. I brought my business experience to East Side High School Board of Trustees, elected there from 92 through 2000. 2000 to 2008, San Jose City Council, and I've served on the Board of Supervisors now for almost 6 years. I'm hoping that you'll trust me to preside over this great city of ours and bring public safety back to our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liccardo.
Thanks to each of you for taking time out of your evening to be here, and thank you to the D6 Neighborhood Leadership Group and League of Women Voters and all who work so hard to bring us together to talk about the future of our city. I'd like to start with the past, though. My grandparents started a little grocery store in the 1940s in downtown San Jose. And they started, like so many thousands of families here, with very little money, but fueled by a passionate faith about what San Jose could bring them through their hard work and sacrifice, and perhaps more importantly, the opportunities it could bring to their children. And I inherited the passionate faith of my grandparents, but I also inherited, as I came into office, I inherited billions of dollars of retirement debt. And we worked through the Great Recession, having to make very difficult decisions around cuts and layoffs. And since that time, after pushing for pension reform, I pushed to utilize those savings, some $25 million a year, and increasing, to be able to restore safety by pushing for additional officers, accelerating hiring, and additional retention of officers by improving pay. I'll continue to do that as your mayor.
Thank you. I've been told we're getting a lot of feedback, so both of you, myself included, will try to hold the mic a little further away to avoid some of that feedback. The first question has to do with the quality of life. A broad question, 1 minute response time, both of you. The question is, both of you have long family histories in the area, made contributions. One, how will you work to improve the quality of life we all share, such as fresh water, the gentleness and quiet of the area, and special quality of San Jose? And then how would you rate San Jose compared to Palo Alto, Burlingame, Mountain View, and other Silicon Valley cities? Why don't we start with you, Mr. Clara?
When I think about quality of life, it seems to me we start with our residents, the people here. And how can we engage our residents more powerfully in shaping this direction, course of this city, particularly of our own communities, our own neighborhoods? About a year ago, I proposed an initiative called participatory budgeting, a way of engaging people directly in identifying the key priorities in their neighborhoods that they most want City Hall to address, and then allocating funding that they would directly appropriate to those objectives. Not simply spending public money, but what we see through these processes as they've emerged throughout the country and throughout the world is that people start to bring in their own resources, their volunteer energies. They bring in foundation money from the company they work for. They bring in lots of other resources, and we see how a little bit of dollars goes a long way, and suddenly people are talking to each other in new ways about how we can come together and solve problems. As mayor, I'm going to improve quality of life by bringing people together through initiatives like this.
Thank you. Mr. Cortese, same question.
Well, I think nothing's more sacred to quality of life than public safety. And when I left the city council about 5.5 years ago, we had 1,400 police officers. We have 889 today. They've been resigning at a rate of 70 per year, 57 this year. We were once the safest big city in America. Now we have a crime rate per the San Jose City Auditor that's higher than the state or national average. Public safety is at the core of how we feel about our neighborhoods, how we feel about our children going to schools in our neighborhoods, how well we're able to support school safety in our schools, how well we're able to support the quality of life in our surrounding neighborhood, in our parks, around our libraries, and around all the other investments that the city makes. That's job number one for me as I take over the job of Mayor of San Jose. Restoring neighborhood patrols, working with our schools, once again, on crime prevention, restoring the violent crimes prevention units, so we're working more aggressively to defeat gang crime and other violent crimes. Yes, I've stood up for our Green Line initiative and many quality of life issues, but that is the most important issue.
Thank you. The next question has to do with, I guess we can't escape it, the question of pension and the San Jose Police Department. What is your proposal for finding a balance between what the public expects in terms of public safety and what the officers expect in terms of compensation? Some of you started to draw with that, Mr. Cortese. But what is your plan to fund these expectations and plans? And Mr. Cortese, we'll start with you.
Well, you just heard me say how far we're down in terms of police officers, but we do have 140 positions in this budget right now that are vacant but funded, fully funded. So that money is not going out to payroll because we don't have the officers hired. We don't have enough cadets coming out of our academies to take up those positions. So we need to do that first and foremost. To answer your question, number one, we have money for those officers right now. I have proposed that of that 140 equivalent, full-time equivalent, we may want to use some of those funds to create incentives to keep people who go through our academies here in the police force. We've been told we can't use penalties, but we can certainly use incentives to keep people here. I think long-term, when you look at what's happening this year with sales tax and property tax on a growing economy, exceeding budget projections by double right now, we should be able to make the commitment to move those extra dollars over to law enforcement services and ultimately to public safety firefighter services as well.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Liccardo.
70% of the voters approved pension reform in 2012 for a simple reason. we could no longer afford to pay officers to work because we were paying them so much to retire. In fact, over the last 5 years, an officer who's retiring in their first year could receive a pension of $104,000 a year. And their first year retirement, that's at age 52 or 53 typically, that would increase 3% every year for the rest of their life. So they'd be earning $200,000 by the time they're in their 70s. And so I pushed for pension reform because we have a $3 billion unfunded debt that you and your children will bear if we don't get this fixed. Now, where Dave Cortese and I differ is that although Measure B has been approved, only part of it has been implemented. And we've been able to save $25 million last year, and I've used that to push for accelerated hiring and restoring pay. We'll continue to restore pay, and officers will stay on board increasingly as that pay is restored. But we've got to implement the rest of the pension reform because we're paying $38 million a year more now today than we were last year because we've been unable to fully implement it because of the union challenges in court.
Thank you, Mr. Liccardo. Each of the candidates has 2 rebuttal cards, and Mr. Cortese is now going to use his first rebuttal card as a 30-second response.
Yeah, thank you. And I really want to use the rebuttal to expand because I realized I didn't answer the question fully. In terms of how we deal with pensions now, pension reform is in the city charter, thanks to Measure B. Part of it was thrown out by the court, as we were just told. No mayor or council has jurisdiction over changing pension reform. It can't be changed again now without going to the voters, without going to the ballot again. What we can do is what I was saying a few minutes ago in the prior question. We can work with wages. We can work with money that's in the budget now for wages and money that will be in the budget in the future for wages to make our wage packages more attractive so we can compete with other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think I see the next rebuttal card from Mr. Liccardo. 30 seconds.
Supervisor Cortese would like you to believe pension reform is done. It's not. We are currently litigating a very critical part of pension reform that would save us $48 million a year if it was being implemented. But we are not because of this litigation. And Dave Cortese has said publicly that he refuses to stand up and defend the will of the voters in court. We have to do that. It's the will of the voters, and it's critical to ensuring that we have a sustainable fiscal future in the city to enable us to afford to pay for cops. As I said, we saw retirement costs increase $38 million last year because we have not yet solved the problem. We have to solve it.
Thank you. There is a request from the candidate that they each have a 1-minute rebuttal. So for the next rebuttal card, you'll each have a minute rather than 30 seconds. How's that? I'm going to switch over to a question that came from the District 6 leadership group that is organizing the forum, and this has to do with parks and park maintenance. District 6 is park deficient with about 1/2 acre per 1,000 residents compared to the goal of 3 acres per 1,000 residents. Parkland dedication fees on new development are designed to provide for new parks, trails, and major repairs for parks within 3 miles of development. I don't know if you're all familiar with this. However, since 2007, some of the downtown high-rise development developers have had discounts. Based on staff reports, these developers had as much as 50% of their park dedication fees waived or reduced, resulting in a reported net loss of $20 million of uncollected revenue that would have been dedicated for parks. There is a possibility that this type of so-called discount may also be applied to development in the city's new proposed urban villages, of which in District 6 there are 6 proposed and identified. So if you do the math, there is a potential for as much as $40 million of parkland dedication fees being lost. So the question is, and this is a 2-minute response because we wanted you to give some thought to this, and for our audience, you should know that these questions were presented to the candidates earlier. The question is, would you support this practice of waiving or reducing parkland dedication fees? And more important, to residents of District 6, do you see the potential for the city to purchase land for parks and to adequately operate and maintain these parks without resorting to having to give these discounts to developers? And we'll start with you, Mr. Liccardo.
I want to make one thing clear about the downtown high-rise incentive. That was actually crafted in 2006 before I came into office. I ultimately supported its continuation for several reasons, and I'd be happy to describe why. But the primary reason being we couldn't get anything built. That is, no high-rise would get built without a reduction in fees. And we saw that throughout the Great Recession when we saw essentially nothing happening over our skyline for about 5 years while other cities were building very actively. But I think it's critical, and no, I don't support continuation of a discount. What I propose specifically within the downtown, if I proposed a discount, I would just continue the old policy. I actually proposed that we take the portion of the discount and require developers to pay that out over time. In fact, at a level that in which the city could actually generate more revenue, even in net present value, by requiring that the fee be paid out over time. The city can now use that money differently. It's no longer just to buy parkland or to build parks, but also to maintain parks, to use the tools we need to make our parks usable. Most importantly, people, that is park rangers, park maintenance, because what we have in the downtown is a unique set of challenges, unlike just about any other part of the city. We've got very little land on which to build parks, but we've got a real challenge in making those parks usable and open to families. We've all been to St. James Park. I think you know what I mean, right? We need park rangers, we need maintenance, we need supervision. That takes people, and you can't pay for people with park fees. And so what I propose specifically is, for example, for mid-rise developers, simply allow them to pay 3/4 of the fee today, 1/4 of the fee gets paid out over time, and you can arrange it so that the city gets more than that share. As long as the developer pays out over time, ultimately it tends to get paid out by an HOA or an association. The city benefits, the taxpayers benefit, and most importantly, we have parks we'll actually use, rather than having a Guadalupe Trail that everyone's too afraid to be on.
Thank you. Mr. Cortese, same question.
You know, first of all, I would not support an extension of the waiver to the urban villages. I think we're underparked in the city. Most districts are craving more parkland. There's opportunities right now for park acquisition that aren't being exercised. I met with Shasta Hanchett neighbors on numerous occasions about very specific opportunities in their neighborhood where park acquisition is available now, land is available now, but the city doesn't seem to be moving on it. So what happens downtown, I will say, whether you're talking about traffic mitigation rules or park dedication rules, should and can be contained downtown because it is a different land use creature than the rest of the city, than our suburbs. Today, you have in city council budgets, in city budgets assigned by council district, construction and conveyance tax funds on top of park dedication funds. Construction and conveyance tax funds that accumulate that traditionally have been used for park acquisition. In District 8, when I was the council member, from 01 through 08, we built 8 parks in 8 years. Those weren't park dedication ordinance monies. Those were construction and conveyance tax funds that we would put in reserve accounts, saving up just like you would in your household for 2 or 3 years, and simultaneously getting the neighborhoods involved in park master plan processes so everybody could help decide. Are you going to have a top lot, or are you going to have a youth lot? What kind of features are you going to have? Or what particular piece of property are you going to acquire? And once we got that process done, we would empty those accounts out and actually go into production of those parks. It's a methodical process that should be happening all the time, and it should have been happening for the last 7 or 8 years, certainly the last 6 years that I've been gone. I'd like to see your neighborhoods connected back to City Hall in that way. I can't imagine a week in this city should go by, ever, without having park master plan meetings going on throughout the city in various neighborhoods. That's what you can expect from me as mayor.
Thank you. That is the big issue facing our city, isn't it? How do we balance what we want to do with the revenues we may or may not have? So this one gets to kind of one of the issues with regard to the lack of revenue for the city of San Jose, and that's looking at our jobs and housing situation. San Jose is a bedroom community because it has more housing than jobs, and this results in chronic budget problems. Cities like Palo Alto and Mountain View, by contrast, have large industrial and business bases, which San Jose does not have. San Jose, frankly, needs more jobs. 68,000 residents every day leave to work outside the city in San Jose. Employees, employment or jobs is a key driver of tax revenue. Palo Alto has a jobs to housing ratio of 3 to 1. So 3 jobs for every 1 resident. San Jose, meanwhile, has a ratio that is more like less than 1, 0.86. to 1. That tells you a lot about why we're so revenue poor. Our general plan asks us to strive to increase that to at least a 1.3. At the same time, and I've got 4 questions here about affordable housing, we have a housing shortage, not only, really at all ends. Rents are high, homes are expensive, seniors, young people have difficulty finding housing, and people commute as far away as Tracy and Gilroy because they can't afford to live here. Also, developers and construction trades pressure the city to approve more housing, but this doesn't help the jobs-housing balance. So the question is, and this is a 2-minute response, and it's a 2-part question. What do you think, first, is the proper mix between jobs and housing? And how would you move San Jose to that balance? And at the same time, being concerned about the critical need for housing. And the question that comes from the audience is, what can you do to help people afford homes? So you've got to tackle both. So what is your response to that? And we will start with you, Mr. Cortese, on this one.
Thank you. It's a great question. It's been kind of the penultimate question. It's been a question that's been around for as long as I've been involved or following San Jose politics because, as you said, we have a weak tax base here. It is in a large part because we have a lot of land use that doesn't contribute sales taxes at all. Houses don't do that, like retail does or like some manufacturing companies do. And of course, at least in the distant past, we had relatively low property tax values on homes relative to commercial, industrial, retail properties. So that has been our history, and it's been a legacy that's costing us. And it makes it difficult, as we try to answer some of the early questions, to keep up with the kind of essential services that we need. So it's very important that I think that we continue to aspire to the goals that are in the general plan currently in terms of pushing to increase those ratios, the ratio of jobs to housing. A council member and I were both involved in taking the San Jose general plan as is and moving it into a regional plan called Plan Bay Area. A few weeks back, I wrote an op-ed, which is published in the Mercury News. You can Google that. And it talks about that plan and our commitment to those strategies in the plan, not just in this city, but in the region to balance jobs and housing. You're asking or suggesting that we need to do both, produce housing and produce jobs, and that's the dilemma. It is something that we absolutely have to do, but think in your mind about leading with jobs. I doubt if anyone in the room is against job growth. If we don't build 140,000 homes in this city and 600,000 in the region during this next general plan horizon, we're actually going to be choking off job growth. And in fact, 600,000 homes in the region will choke off job growth by 100,000 jobs already. So we do need to keep our eye on the ball.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Well, our city is still suffering the hangover of decades of what we call conversions of industrial and employment land for housing. When I came into office in 2007, we'd just seen a huge swaths of Midtown converted for housing, and indeed a plan out in Evergreen that Supervisor Cortese was supportive of to convert an Evergreen campus in the hillsides for many units of housing. And so I came in at a time when Mayor Reed had just been elected, and we pushed to halt the conversions because we knew it was eroding our tax base. It was causing a lot of problems in terms of traffic and quality of life, and we drew a line. And I led the General Plan Task Force along with 35 other community members, which was finally approved in 2011, in which we maintained that line. And we did it because we think it's critical to put our residents first, ahead of the developers. And our residents aren't getting the services they deserve, and that means we need to focus on preserving employment lands for employment. Now, we can solve the dilemma Supervisor Cortese referred to through smart growth. We know we do need housing, but there's one kind of housing that you can build that's actually a net positive for the city, and that's very high-density housing right on transit. When you build very high-density housing right on transit, you're building something that's naturally affordable because people no longer have as much a dependence on automobiles if they can walk or use transit. And secondly, we know that those units tend to be smaller, and let's face it, our households are all getting smaller too. That's the way the demographics are working. So it solves an affordability issue, but it also solves a fiscal issue because the city actually generates more revenue from those high-density developments per acre, and it doesn't have to provide as much in services to far-flung parts of the city. Now, there's certainly much we can do about encouraging jobs, and I've got an extensive plan all laid out in my book. And if you need some sleep one night, feel free to take a look. We got lots of copies out here, but I'll save that for another question.
Thank you. Now a very specific question, and this will be, I think this is a 45-second response. This comes from the audience. How would you tackle, because this is something everybody deals with, how would you tackle the repair of our streets and roads? And we'll start with you, Mr. Liccardo.
That's an easy one. I know many of us who have been riding down the Alameda on a routine basis before it got repaved started to regard all those potholes as traffic calming devices. But in fact, they're not. They're potholes, and we've got a big burden on our hands. I've been pushing to use more innovative approaches to street repaving, like hold-in-place recycling, which can save us about 30% of the cost so we can pave more streets. It's actually environmentally better as well. I've also pushed in 2010, led a countywide initiative that added about $5 or $6 million to our coffers to be able to use for street repaving. But we've got a lot more way to go, and that means we've got to fix our fundamental fiscal challenges. If we're spending $250 million a year more today on retirement costs than we were a decade ago, we can't pave roads.
Thank you. Mr. Cortese.
Yeah, I would characterize the problem a little more seriously than traffic calming devices. And when you look at the fact that, according to some of the numbers I've seen, the city has an $800 million pavement maintenance backlog right now. So you got to put that in perspective in terms of dollars. $40 million a year for 20 years just to get caught up, or divide it out any way you want. We have a big problem, and we're going to have to use extraordinary means and the kind of financing tools that we've used in the past to build libraries, to build parks, to build police substations and fire stations. And that means we have to go out to you, members of the public, I think, in coming years and talk about whether or not we go out with a bond issue to try to raise enough money to take out as much of that as we can. That would be my immediate proposal.
Thank you. We have a very different question next, and this has to do with human trafficking. This is something I used to think was happening overseas, but San Jose is developing a reputation, according to this question, for being a place where sexual services are being provided in places that appear to be ordinary businesses. Places such as, and I don't think they mean to be disparaging of all, spas and salons and coffee bars and massage parlors, but some of these are places where we understand there's human trafficking involved. How do you intend to address this issue? We'll start with you, Mr. Cortese.
Well, I appreciate the question. At my initiative just 90 days ago in the year-end budget for the county, we secured $850,000 in the budget to create the county's first human trafficking team. That added 2 personnel in the sheriff's office, 2 personnel in the DA's office. Already, in fact, a couple of days ago, the first press conference was held. We have people in custody and victims that have been rescued. There's active cases going on. By the way, there's a tip line. If for any reason you know of or suspect that something's going on, you can use that. I am tired of moving when I have to in the evenings to go to my campaign office from 70 West heading over to Technology Drive going down North 1st Street and seeing the obvious incidents of prostitution happening there. But then you look, these are real lives. Just a few weeks ago, 2 young women, I think 19 and 20-year-olds, were found dead in one of those motels. I don't know if it was homicide. We don't know what it was, but it's the kind of victimization we don't want to have happen in this city.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
I served as a prosecutor of human trafficking crimes when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. a few years ago, and then as a DA, I prosecute sexual assault crimes, so this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I think it's critical for us to ensure we've got a network of safe houses, and this is true really for both domestic violence as well as for human trafficking. It's critical that in the first 24 hours, when a girl or a young woman or a young man is trying to escape their situation, they need to have a safe place to go, which means you've got to have the housing ready to go, and you have to have a network there. And as with domestic violence, we don't have enough of that emergency housing. And so I propose using an impact fee, actually it's coming before the council in November, so we can get more of that kind of housing in place. Secondly, we need to go after all those ancillary folks who profit from the industry. We need to go after the motel owners who know what's going on, because they see who's renting by the hour and who's renting by the night. They know exactly what's going on, and that's exactly what I pushed to do, for example, along Monterey Road and South 1st Street, and using our city attorney's office and code enforcement.
Thank you. We're now going to embark on something we call a lightning rod round, which means these are quick yes, no, maybe 15 seconds for explanation. But these are questions that just want to know where you stand on these things, okay? So 15 seconds. Is that okay, gentlemen? All right. Okay. Aha, favorite subject, garbage. Recently, the council voted to increase garbage rates. The council also recently voted to place future garbage bills on property owners' property tax bills. Do you support these two decisions, yes or no, Mr. Cortese?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the background of the decision, but if it creates efficiency at City Hall, not to increase the garbage rates, but to put them on the property tax bill, I don't have a problem with that. What I am concerned about is who the city's contracting out with. I've heard that they're using outside companies outside the city to create the jobs to send that billing out. I don't know if that's true.
Mr. Liccardo, same question?
Yeah, I supported both decisions. It saves ratepayers money when we're able to put it on the property tax bill. And with regard to the increase, we have very ambitious recycling goals to have to meet, because we've run out of landfill space, folks, and God's not making any more land, and so we've got to find ways to recycle, and it costs more money.
Thank you. This has to do with the airport. The West Side Airport expansion will be adding a great deal more traffic and noise to our community. And while we have a curfew, there is only a $2,500 penalty fee per violation. Residents are not well represented in management and regulation of airport activity. Question number one, again, this is a quick yes, no, lightning rod. As mayor, would you support an airport noise and issue committee that it includes neighborhood representatives as well as airport, city, and county officials? Mr. Liccardo.
Yes, and I'd also support increasing the fine on air traffic.
Thank you. Mr. Cortese.
Yes, absolutely.
Very good. Housing. The Ellis Act allows owners to evict their tenants in the event they plan to sell a rental property. Do you support exemptions or overturning the Ellis Act in San Jose in an era of rising rental housing values and a shortage of affordable housing? Yes or no? Mr. Cortese.
I think we have to take a look at it, but I want people to understand that when I was on the city council, we spent a year crafting an updated rent control ordinance that allows hardship cases to come before the housing department and be adjudicated there, so that a single mom who has children in school, for example, can get an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Liccardo.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, the Ellis Act allows owners to evict their tenants in the event they plan to sell a rental property. Do you support exemptions or overturning the Ellis Act in San Jose, because we are now in an era of rising rental housing values and a shortage of affordable housing?
Well, if you're referring to a state law, we don't have the authority to overturn a state law. Certainly, I've been an advocate for preserving the rights of renters. But
Thank you. Turning to education. There are 19 school districts within the city. We do have quite a few. The demands on a mayor's time would be the one single thing a mayor can do to improve K-12 education is it, I guess? Do you feel it might be a good use of something that the mayor can do? Oh, I'm sorry. What is the one single thing a mayor can do to help with the issues of education, which generally are, of course, outside of what the mayor's responsibilities are? Mr. Liccardo.
Let's increase the tax on medical marijuana dispensaries by 10% and use that $6 million to expand after-school programs to over 8,000 kids throughout the city.
Yeah, having been extensively involved in city school district partnerships throughout my years. There are many things that we can do, but I think the first thing I want to do is restore after-school homework centers. We had 200 of them when I was on the council. It was an expanding program. It was very cost-effective.
Thank you. We're going to go back to one of the longer 2-minute questions that have to do, in this case, with growth and preservation. And just as background, this is again from the leadership group in District 6. Here in District 6, there are farmhouses from the 1800s, 1920s bungalows, and mid-century Eichlers. This is a very highly desirable neighborhood. As a result, District 6 has a lot of rebuild and infill developments. Property owners, of course, have rights within limits to develop their properties as they wish. At the same time, most of the residents who came here paid a premium to live in this historic established neighborhood. Historic structures can be integrated into new developments, and old houses often can be remodeled rather than replaced to maintain the distinctive character of a neighborhood. San Jose is currently working on a Neighborhoods of Distinction ordinance to simplify the process of establishing conservation districts. If the current draft is approved, some of the older homes would require a historic review before a demolition permit is granted. Well, not every old structure is worth saving. It would be helpful to have a citywide inventory. So it really is, this question is about the inventory. A citywide inventory which would reduce the burden on homeowners by identifying regions where older structures are more likely to be historic. And so this really has to do with the historic preservation of regulations that affect homeowners' ability to do something. So the question is, number one, as mayor, would you, one, in your first budget, support the funding for the inventory so that Neighborhoods of Distinction ordinance can be completed? Two, would you support a moratorium on demolition of pre-1965 structures until the historic preservation ordinance is implemented? Please provide a yes or no to that one with a brief explanation, but you do have some time. 2 minutes. I'm sorry, this doesn't really require 2 minutes, just because it's a yes or no. So let's start with this first one. Would you, one, in your first budget, support funding for the inventory? And two, would you support a moratorium on demolition of the structures so that the historic preservation ordinance can be implemented? Mr. Cortese. This is 15 seconds. Because it is yes or no. There is a follow-up question.
Okay. Assuming there's a follow-up, let's do our best here. Yes, I do support the inventory. I was supporting the inventory back when I was on the city council. That needs to happen. When I grew up as a kid on a prune orchard in Evergreen, I saw historic inventory being lost all over that area. It's happened all over the city, and we need to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Just on the first question.
Yes, just the inventory question.
Yes. We already have over $200,000 in developer fees that we can use for surveys today. We don't have the planning staff to implement it. What I have proposed is being able to utilize nonprofits like PAC San Jose, Preservation Action Council San Jose, and History San Jose, partner with us to help us contract with somebody who's credited and get the surveys done with the money we have.
Okay, thank you. The second question, I'm sorry, really should have separated. Would you support a moratorium on demolition of pre-1965 structures until the historic preservation ordinance is implemented? And yes or no? Mr. Liccardo.
No, I think a moratorium is a pretty blunt tool, and I think there are structures built prior to 1965 we probably all agree we'd like to see toppled. And so I think I'm happy to require, for example, a survey be taken for some home that is built at a certain date, but not an across-the-board moratorium.
Mr. Cortese.
I wouldn't support a ban, but if we were in the process of coming up with an ordinance, I would certainly join that ordinance formation with a temporary moratorium so that people that had homes in that category didn't rush out and start demolishing them all before we finish the ordinance. And it's the only reason to have a moratorium, and then we can come back and revisit the issue.
Okay, now this will be a 1-minute response as the follow-up to both of those things. All right, if it's not the moratorium or if it's not the inventory, what other measures would you take to encourage remodel rather than replace? And I guess this is really coming from the concern of people preservation in their heart. What would you do to encourage remodel rather than replace, making San Jose a more interesting city to visit and live in? Mr. Liccardo.
Well, certainly, I think we can work with those homeowners who are living in homes with some historic designation and create a policy in which we waive fees for the rehabilitation of those structures as long as the rehabilitation is historically consistent with their designation. I think we can also, as revenues are restored to the city and we add code enforcement, I think we need to get code enforcement back focused on enforcing. And that means we enforce on plastic windows that are installed, or plastic panes that are installed in homes where they don't belong. I think we all know what the most egregious examples are. We can do that certainly within our budget because we know the fines can help sustain the personnel.
Mr. Cortese.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a great way to create incentives for that kind of preservation. And what we've used in the past with limited success, of course, is floor area ratio rules. And the motivation for the city council and the mayor when I was on the council really came from this community to do that, because there were a lot of monster homes being created in the middle of very traditional neighborhoods that didn't seem to abide by any sort of rule in terms of how big the ratio would be of your house to your lot. I think we can go back, and probably should go back and take a look at those rules, because obviously if you tighten up those rules in certain areas so it's not worth it for people to knock down a home and try to build a new one, that's the type of regulatory powers that the city would usually use in a situation like that. Restrictions on how much you can do will usually lead, in a lot of cases, to status quo, and I think that's what we're trying to get at here, preserving existing neighborhoods.
Thank you. There are many strategies, certainly, and thank you for your comments. Now I'd like to get to another one, the final of the D6 questions, and this really has to do with, excuse, it's a long preference before I get to the question. But part of it is so you understand the background of this, because the questions are going to be yes, no, but the background is important. And this has to do with the concept of a city giving gifts. How does the city give gifts? It does if it's for a public purpose, for land development. San Jose, like most major cities, and there are about 120 cities like San Jose, operates as a charter city, okay? Which means that San Jose makes its own laws or ordinances. Often laws are stricter than the state laws, but these charter laws, cities cannot contradict state law. But generally when we have a charter city, we can make tougher restrictions. One of these allows San Jose to provide, and I'm quoting from the charter, any gift of public money or thing of value, such as a tax subsidy, any discounted city fees, below market leases, or below cost of city services. So this is kind of a gift to a developer, as long as it is, quote unquote, for a public purpose. A lot of times we think of these as incentives to get development going, okay? Per the state law, our general plan can be modified, of course, to rezone properties to a different zoning, and this often happens. And some of these rezonings sometimes are, it's not consistent with our general plan, but they're done for various reasons. This action often results, however, in substantial increases in the value of that property. Conversion of land to residential land use increases the cost of city services. And we talked a little bit about that before, about the jobs housing ratio. So it makes our budget deficits worse, and it spreads our city service thinner. Are you all kind of with me on this? So this is something that the city does. It's one of its tools in its arsenal to encourage development. So the question is, well, but we as citizens, how do we know about all of these gifts or discounts? In order to provide sunshine and accountability, which is really important, regarding these decisions, will you, as the next mayor, provide to the public on a regular basis, such as a quarterly report or perhaps an annual report, would you provide the following information? And I'm just going to read them really quickly. Information that would include, a report that would include all of those gifts as defined by law, all the rezonings that would be not in conformance with the general plan or changes that portion of it, who the recipient of each gift, what developer, what business, the gift amount, the rezoning, the changes in assessed value, and tell us what the public purpose is. And most important, perhaps, tell us about the impact that these gifting does on our city budget. It's a yes, no, but then I've got two follow-up questions to that. So, Ms. Clara, yes or no?
Well, yes. Look, gifts of public funds are prohibited. If we're talking about benefits that developers derive from
Yes,
the zoning,
I think this is
I'm,
what
I'm
this is.
happy to publicly report that. Those hearings are all public anyway, but I'm happy to support any public noticing process. Additionally, in addition to what we currently do.
Mr. Cortese?
Yes, I have no problem. At the county gifts, either to the county or the county that the county is involved in, either through an elected official or otherwise, are reported on a single sheet of paper so the general public can have an easy time of seeing them. And I think what that maybe is what the question is asking here. Are we willing to put these transactions on a single piece of paper for people to look at? Yes.
That really is, I believe, the gist of it. Okay. Now, you know, maybe gifts is a strong word, say incentives, so these packages of incentives to developers, okay. In your opinion, have these subsidies or incentives, have they made a difference and have they mattered in the past? 30 seconds, Mr. Cortese, we'll start with you and then Mr. Liccardo. Have these subsidies mattered in the past? Have they made a difference?
Well, I think they do, absolutely. I mean, let's look, before the dissolution of redevelopment, the entire agency was in the business of creating subsidies for businesses, land subsidies and everything else to try to create, you know, what ended up being over $1 billion worth of redevelopment in downtown San Jose and other places. So that alone gives you an example of how this happens. It does happen. It's a part of city government to some extent. I will say, as Councilman Ricardo said, all of that comes up in public hearings all the time. So it's just a matter of maybe simplifying so people can see what's happening.
Thank you. Mr. Liccardo.
Yes, it's absolutely had an impact. It goes back to our jobs and housing balance. It undermines our fiscal stability as a city, which means you don't get the services you deserve. And as we saw, for example, throughout Midtown, in the earlier part of the last decade, when Dave Cortese was on the council and routinely industrial and employment lands were converted to housing, you saw the results. You got lots of housing, not much retail, no real jobs, and the taxpayer holds the bag.
All right, then the follow-up question to that is, well, okay, those incentives have helped, and we've seen good things come out of it, but in this current economic climate, economy is good. Are those gifts, subsidies, incentives still needed? Yes or no? Why or why not? 30 seconds. We'll start with you, Mr. Ricardo.
Probably picked up from my last answer. I don't support them. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea to convert employment land. The only place where I think it's appropriate is at or near BART stations or light rail stations where you can build very high densities and actually bring more dollars into the taxpayer coffers rather than fewer. So I think it's been really a tremendously negative impact on this city and its ability to provide basic services for its residents. And I don't support the continuation of conversion of employment lands, and that's why I stood against it in 2007, and again when I led the General Planning Task Force in 2011.
Thank you. And I was asked to just clarify that both of you did say you would support and provide annual summary reports of these gifts and subsidies. And I realize a lot of this is available, perhaps, but it's not transparent. I think that's what the community is asking, is like, can we see it in one sheet of paper?
I'm sorry, I was unclear. I thought the question was whether or not the subsidies were a good idea.
No, I was
Okay.
just asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yes, sorry. I was asked to clarify that. Okay. I'm sorry, yes. Oh, okay. You both agreed and said that the subsidies were important and have been effective in terms of economic.
No, we haven't. I do not.
You didn't? Oh, okay.
I don't support them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so the question is in these economic times, do we still want to have these subsidies and gifts? Are they still needed, yes or no, and why or not?
Yeah, I'm not really clear as to whether or not my opponent here is confused or I'm confused or all of us are confused at this point. He can't say he opposes subsidies because a few minutes ago he told you he's in favor of park subsidies, PDO ordinance downtown San Jose so we can get more high-rise development, and he supported those all along. So if that's a pure question of do you support subsidies in general to promote development and are they still necessary, I agree that they're going to be necessary to some extent. Industrial conversion is a different issue. It's whether or not you're going to allow somebody to build houses or something like that on industrial lands. We put in some of the toughest restrictions in my second term on the council in doing that. In fact, we even reduced the number of opportunities to once a year to even bring those applications.
I see. Yes.
I think it's important to
Rebuttal.
note that Dave Cortese supported that park fee reduction in 2006 and again in 2007 on high rises in downtown, first of all. Secondly, I believe the question was about industrial land conversions because those have long-term impacts on our ability to pay bills in this city, and that's what I oppose. And third of all, let's be clear about what we're talking about in the downtown. When you convert a parking lot, which has an assessed value of $1 million, into a $130 million tower, you now have something you can tax and get a lot more revenue out of. And within a year or two, the taxpayers get every dollar back. Maybe it's 3 or 4 years, but you can be assured the taxpayer does much better when you have a high-rise tower on top of an empty parking lot.
Thank you. These are complex issues, but it's good for us in the community to know about them and to know your thoughts on them. So thank you. All right, we've got a final question. It says, Gloria, be funny. Why do donors from outside of San Jose give a large amount of money to mayoral candidates? And how much money have you accepted from non-San Jose residents? I guess either a dollar amount or percentage would be helpful. We'll start with you, Mr. Liccardo. 1 minute.
Yes, I don't keep track of what percentage comes from which city or which particular town in the valley. I know that my support comes throughout Silicon Valley. I'm proud to be supported by many folks in the tech industry who appreciate my vision for how we're going to bring jobs to San Jose and create a vibrant place that will sustain this valley. But I think what's really more at play isn't so much the money we accept, but what the independent expenditure committees, the PACs, accept. My opponent, Dave Cortese, has benefited so far at last count from $443,000 from various unions throughout the state and the country, Sacramento, New York, everywhere. And they don't contribute at $1,100 increments, which is the cap under our rules, but in fact, unlimited amounts. $50,000 at a time are going from organizations from Sacramento and New York into independent expenditure committees that are supporting my opponent or opposing me.
Thank you, Mr. Cortese.
Yeah, I didn't even look at political independent committee expenditures on behalf of my opponent all this time. Since last December, we've been campaigning until just a week and a half ago, my campaign manager walked in with it. He's worried about over $400,000 of working people contributions from unions and PACs. He's had over $500,000 from wealthy CEOs. Some of those checks, at least one of them was as high as $52,000. I'm told that one of those CEOs has actually doubled down and gone up to $80,000 total in the primary runoff. We don't control those contributions. I'm not criticizing him for that. He has no overview of that at all. He can't say yes, he can't say no. I can't say yes, I can't say no. That's why they call them independent committees. We are by law precluded from even communicating with them. That's the way the system is right now. When I was on the council, we fought a legal battle to try to limit those contributions to PACs to $500 for these mayor's races. The Chamber of Commerce, San Jose Silicon Valley, sued us because they wanted to make larger contributions and lost the suit. That's why this is happening.
And sadly, it is an issue. This whole concern about money in politics is one that continues to bother all of us. We've had good questions, a variety of topics. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So it's now time for our closing comments, and that's 30 seconds. We started earlier with Mr. Cortese, so for the closing comments, 30 seconds. We will start with you, Mr. Liccardo.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here this evening. It's a testament of your care about our city and about its future. 4 individuals who have led the city before as mayor, Susan Hammer, Tom McHenry, Ron James, and our current mayor, Chuck Reed, all support one candidate in this race, and that's me. And they support me for one reason, because I have led and I'll continue to lead. And I won't offer vague platitudes. I'll offer very specific solutions so you know exactly how you'll see services restored and safety improved and how we'll pay for it. I encourage you to take a look at the book when you have a chance. It'll become a major motion picture in a couple weeks, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Cortese.
Well, we don't have a motion picture in the works, just a website, davecortese.com. You can go there. You'll see that The last 5 consecutive police chiefs have endorsed me in law enforcement organizations, fire, police, nurses, teachers, working people in this community, throughout this community, are endorsing me in this campaign because they trust me to restore public safety in our neighborhoods, to make this city the safest big city in America again, and I hope you'll trust me to do the same thing. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Let's give them a big round of applause. I do want to comment and I want to thank you for being here. We should really thank we have 2 great candidates and we're very fortunate. I do want to do an ad for the League of Women Voters. You can go to www.smartvoter.org to get more information on all the candidates, all the election issues, all of the ballot measures, and you will also find some information about the money that goes to each of the candidates and each of the proposals. I'd like to now, I guess Larry would like to say some closing comments. And again, thank you very much for being such a great audience. Larry?